So I've found references to the Phoenicians and Dilmun, this one coming from the Westminster Review. And here on this page, which is page 359, this is just for a quick synopsis. This is for a direct connection of what I've been saying about the Sumerian tradition of the dying and rising sun that was relayed through Stephen Herbert Langdon's work, and his connection to the mother goddess Ninhursag, the mother of the mountain, and how this tradition seems to, at least as far as the written record goes, or what our version of the written record allows, how it traces all the way back to the so-called holy island of Dilmun, of which in modern day there are 33 artificial islands. It's clearly still, the pinnacle of, it's the paradisical, prototypical Garden of Eden, right? Which is still worshipped in the deepest trenches of secret societies, or recognized, however you want to put it. So here it reads, this Eshu became in Phoenician mythology the son of Sadiq, meaning the righteous, called Eshmin, meaning the eighth. And that's all this name really means. It's think of it as an epithet. And most god names in these traditions are used as designators of some sort. So the name Eshmin still applies to Toth, right? Instead of thinking of Eshmin and Toth, for instance, as two different names or two different characters, think of the name Eshmin as a designator of Toth's position as the eighth being. One second. Thank you. Stop. Not right now, dude. Alright, so epithets, right? Just like Adonis means Lord, or Baal means Lord, so on and so forth. They usually have some sort of meaning like that, but in modern day, most people understand them as like common names, like my name, Brandon, right? But that's not how it works. So etymology is important. It also means the one who anoints. So called Eshmin, meaning the eighth. He was the sun god, the eighth of their creating gods, the other seven being the seven stars of the Great Bear, ruling the 7 days of the week. The Phoenicians of northern Syria traced their descent from Turos in the Persian Gulf, the holy Akkadian island Dilmun, the modern Bahrain, and it was from thence that they brought the theology of the eight-rayed star and of the barley, the plant of life, the Akkadian Z, so on and so forth. Another name of the Phoenician Eshmin was Tammuz, the Semitic form of the Akkadian Dumuzi, the sun, Dumu, of life, Z. He was the god worshipped in Cyprus as Eshmin the healer, Paon, and this epithet of Paon, the healer, was continued to this god, when he became Apollo, the protector, for it was to Apollo Paon that the gymnopaedia, or dances of naked boys, were danced. He, like Eshmin, was joined with the stars of the Great Bear, okay, so on and so forth, right? You see this interconnection of deities occurring here. And you see this transmission, most importantly, what I'm getting at, again, is from the so-called holy Akkadian island of Dilmun, because that's what I'm seeking to demonstrate, is that this tradition goes as far back as the written record allows. This is, in fact, the point of origination for what becomes the Christ mythos. Okay? This is why the Kabiri is so central and so important to understand, and this is what pretty much no other video or nobody else that I'm aware of really talks about. Understandably, because they don't really have a reason. I have a direct reason to seek this information out, right? So, as above, so below. Like astrology matters. It is the guiding star. Excuse the pun. So here we have the ruling races of prehistoric times, and we just have a further confirmation. This is from James Francis Catharinas Hewitt. He says here on page 314, it was this people who, starting from the forest-clad coasts of western India, which yielded the only shipbuilding timber close to the sea in the Indian Ocean, founded the Kushite Semite maritime commerce of the early Phoenician Turanians. That's an important word right there. Of the early Phoenician Turanians at Touros or Dilmun in the Persian Gulf, and afterwards in Egypt and along the coasts of the Mediterranean, whether they carried the worship of the twin gods, the common meals of the Indian Dravidians, and the other Dravidian customs of the Dorian Greeks, so on and so forth. So just, further confirmation about this supposed, and I'm not saying that this is exactly how things happened. I don't believe the common narrative of history, but what I am demonstrating here is that this is what the narrative supports. You see what I'm getting at here? So, Turanians. This I think it was around 18th century scholarship, 19th century perhaps. There was a theory of etymology, or philology perhaps, linguistics generally, that incorporated the idea. One moment. It incorporated the idea that Native Americans shared the Native Americans of North America shared similarities in their languages with the peoples found throughout Asia. So we're talking, Phoenicia or Mesopotamia generally, India, the Eurasian steppe, that there was this pattern, this interconnected language family. And I think from what I understand, it's been largely abandoned. But you can still find references to this. I think that most of this information's been relegated deeply to like secret societies now. It for some reason it became a very popular, like, this information's all over the place in 17th, 18th, 19th century scholarship. And nowadays it's like scholarship has been completely and utterly dumbed down. I apologize for any pauses or breaks. I'm trying desperately to get my Persian cat to stop making noise for a couple minutes. So there's that further demonstration of the Dilmun connection. Now, I'm just going to help make sense of this as a recap, because I know I have a long string of videos that talk about these things. I know it's very esoteric, it's very disconnected, disjointed. It's kind of hard to understand without having it all put into a singular format, which is what I seek to do. So here you have this tradition, which is it's called Inkian and Hersag Part 2 is what this particular paper is called. But what they're doing is they're just giving a dissertation or a scholia or whatever on the myth of Inkian and Hersag at Dilmun. So generally what occurs, in the briefest way possible, is that there's a marital spat between Inki and Ninhursag. And then there's a chain of events that occur, a little bit of a conflict, and then there's a reconciliation, and ultimately Ninhursag, who is the mother goddess, right, of the mountain, sends these 8 chthonic deities. So, reading here, after a chain of conflict, Inki and Ninhursag unite again. Ninhursaga, with Inki in her womb, gives a seemingly natural birth to 8 deities. Apparently, the 8 plant inside Inki's belly resumed their original purpose, the reproduction of gods. You see here that this, on this right-hand side here, lists, of course it highlights everything other than what I wanted to for some fucking reason. It lists the chain of births, and you have Inzag at the very bottom. Inzag shall be the lord of Dilmun. He is the 8th being that is born in this chain of events sent directly from the mother goddess. Right. Inzak ends the list and the story. Inzak became the god of Dilmun as he was in reality. Okay. Moving forward with the references, let's see. So, I wanted to have a multitude of things pulled up. So on Inzak, right? Let's see. I didn't include, I can't remember which book this is from. It's a screenshot. So Inzak was the Akkadian form of the name of the Sumerian god Inshag, who featured in the last stage of the chain of births which took place in Dilmun, and is described in the legend of Enkian and Hersag. He was one of the principal divinities of the ancient inhabitants of Bahrain, and in the legend referred to as proclaimed Lord of Dilmun. He is said to control reason and wisdom, an area of concern which clearly he inherited from his father. Temples were dedicated to him in Sumerian and Elamite cities, and he was worshipped in Babylonian times under the name Nabu. Later, he became an influential member of the pantheon. He is, according to Rawlinson, the god represented in the sky by the planet Mercury, the sun's closest attendant and a divinity of considerable power and mystery in the ancient world. The planets, incidentally, were called by the Sumerians the big ones that walk about, distinguishing them from the stars, the little ones which are scattered about like grain. Both are pretty concepts. Inshag, Inzag, Nabu, Mercury was the dark god, a wise and supple deity. Alright, so there's that little bit of information on Inzag. Here you see that he is in fact Nabu, he is in fact Mercury. So now you have this connection directly from Dilmun, as far back as the written record allows, that is stating that Mercury, under various names, right, is the 8th being that is sent from the mother goddess. Okay, so there's that one. Now, before I forget, because I didn't pull this one up already, in the Mandaean cosmology, what's the best way to... Mandaean, Jesus, Nabu, maybe that'll... well, they call him Nebu. It's easy enough. In Mandaeism, Jesus is a controversial figure whom they view as a false messiah, irrelevant, but the name Nabu is associated with the planet Mercury and is sometimes identified with the false messiah figure, like Jesus. Right, so what I'm getting at here is that in Mandaeism, there's another reference, they consider Nabu, who they just take the vowel out of, and you leave you with Nibu. In Mandaeism, Nibu is the Mandaic name for the planet Mercury. Nibu is one of the 7 planets who are part of the entourage of Ruha. Nibu is associated with learning and scribes, as well as Christ in Christianity. Other names for Nibu include Markopil, Meshisha, i.e. Jesus the Messiah. Nibu's name is derived from the Akkadian Nabu. Okay, so do you see what I'm saying here? Like, literally, this character is, in fact, no matter how you want to look at it, no matter what you have to say about it, this character is literally directly related to fucking Jesus. So, alright, continuing. Let's get rid of that, get rid of that. Let's see what else I have here. Going in no particular order. So, I've said, I've linked it in several videos. I figure it probably won't hurt to show it here again. Like I said, just so that it's all in one place. For anybody that's continuously watched any of these, I apologize. I don't mean to keep rehashing the same shit, but you know how it goes. So, in the mythology of all races, Stephen Herbert Langdon, curator of the Babylonian section at Museum of the University of Pennsylvania in the early 20th century, preeminent scholar of Assyriology, professor at the University of Oxford, replaced Archibald Sashi. What he has to say is that under the last title of Ninsakila, the pure queen, right, Ninsakila, who is also one of these deities from Dilmun, Ninsakila at Dilmun, somewhere in here it is, Ninsakila, right? Ninsakila at Dilmun is the spouse of Enshag, of Mercury, right? Under the last title, she was wife of her son Nesu, dialectic Lisi. The god Nesu is known almost entirely by his star Antares in Scorpio, which was also identified with Nebo. Now you come down a bit further. So normally it'll say lysin. They'll put the genitive compound in at the end, so it'll read lysin. But this being is known as Nesu. I apologize for the stomping upstairs. So the late Babylonian, coming down further, the myth of the mother goddess and her son and husband who died yearly and descended for a time to the underworld to be rescued and restored to his wife and mother generally appears in Sumerian and especially Babylonian religion at Erech and the cult of Anini and Dumuzi, Ishtar and Tammuz, but the older form of this myth in Sumerian seems to have been associated with the cult of Nintur, Ninhursag, Aruru, and her son and husband, Nesu. Alright, so now we have this recurring tradition of the dying and rising god, Nesu, Lisi, directly related to the star Antares, quote, known almost entirely by his star Antares in Scorpio, which was also identified with Nebo. Right, the breast of the scorpion, Antares, which is underneath of the constellation of the snake holder of Fucus, who represents Eshmun, right? Asclepius, Eshmun, Hermes. Do you see what's going on here? So not only is this preserved in the written record, but it's also in the stars. Luke 10:19, right? I have given unto you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. Nothing shall by any means harm you. All that great stuff. Again, I desperately apologize for the stomping upstairs. I really do. So, from Arthur Bernard Cook, Zeus, god of, whatever this book was. Here's a screenshot. Damascus, the islanders identify, or I'll start up here. The worship of Dionysus Sabazius with his satyrs and of Bindis Hecate with her maenads spread from Thrace to the neighboring islands Thasos, Samothrace, Imbros, Limnos. These two Thracian deities with their respective propyloi formed the indigenous element of the cult in question. Phoenician merchants brought to some of the Thracian islands their own kabiroi, or great ones, 7 gods serving an 8th named Eshmun. Eusebius, Preparatoria Evangelica, Damascus, Philobilus, so on and so forth. The islanders identified Eshmun with the Thracian Dionysius Sabazius and the Cabieroi with his propyloi. Hence, the Dionysius Sabazius acquired the Phoenician title of Eshmun Cadmilus. Alright. Moving forward. I feel like there's one right here that I want to get to. But I can't reach it because it's behind this widget that you probably can't see on the screen, which is annoying as hell. Whatever. Okay. So Cadmilus. So from Egypt's place in universal history, none consecrate. I'll come back to this page. Let's remember it's 229. This is from one moment. Egypt's place in universal history. Baron Bunsen, and all of these fancy titles that come along with it. Translated from the German by Charles H. Cortrell. Okay, so Cadmilus. Okay, first, or I'll start right here. Now, what do we gain from this point of view into the most obscure and mysterious question in mythology? First, that it does not enable us to explain the details of those representations, which do not contain the number 7 or 8, and in fact 7 brothers. And he's just discussing this disparity, this incongruity, where you have a varying number of brothers. And it's or Cabieri, it's as easy as myths change slightly throughout different cultures. It's really not that deep. You know what I mean? Even throughout, look at Christianity in modern day. There's like 1,000 different denominations. Things change from place to place. It's natural. None consequently except the Egyptian. Although Herodotus does not mention the Kibiri as being 7 or 8, there seems no reason to doubt it, for a god who is identified with Tet Hermes in Phoenicia, the son of Sadiq's brother, is worshipped as the 8th and bears the name Ashman as the Phoenician one, Eshman. One second. But the sacred books which tell us the story of Ta's children are still sealed up. He himself, as the god with a beetle for his head, is called the father of the fathers of the gods, and he has horns between which tall feathers are placed. Yada yada yada. Coming down. The name is obviously connected with Cadmus, hence Cadmilos, Casmilos, Camillus, who is explained as Hermes, is Semitic in Eshman Asclepius, the revealing, and afterwards the executor of the divine will, who is therefore so far in a ministerial capacity. The simplest explanation of it is Cadmiel, he who stands before the face of God, according to the Chaldean mode of designation, equivalent to the messenger of the countenance in the Bible. Okay. Let's see if I have any other thing that I find particularly important. Here we have from cuneiform texts, something from the Metropolitan Museum. They have a direct mention that the temple Ikara in this context is noteworthy. Ikara points to Dilmun, where this temple, House of the Quay, is the temple of Ninsakila, who in a certain tradition is the wife of Lysan, the son of Ninhursag. Okay, so again, another connection. What this means is another connection between Lysan, Nesu, right, and Inshak of Dilmun, the spouse of Ninsakila. And the reason that this is important right here is because any cursory inspection online with these fuckheads that really don't understand what they're talking about. I apologize for the language, but I mean it's frustrating. These fuckheads that really don't understand what they're talking about, they constantly throw up roadblocks and try to disconnect deities, and they'll say things like, well, there's actually 2 different Ninsakilas, and they're not related to each other, and yada yada yada. It's the uninitiated. That's the easiest way. I hate saying that, but I mean it's true. It's the uninitiated. They have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea where they're even at. They just kind of drone throughout life. I think that's that about covers it. So again, to recap, now I've demonstrated this interconnection of this character going all the way back as Eshman or as Inshak at Dilmun, right? That this is in fact a tradition that reaches as far back as the written record allows, and it is still preserved in the stars in the zodiac. All right, now keep in mind with that what I had said about the Turanians, wherever that word was used in here. In modern day, when people say Turanians, I've heard many different. It's kind of like a blanket term almost. It usually refers to like a subgroup of Iranians, but really it's a group that encompassed Northern Americans. Let's see if I can find that really quick online. Turanian language theory. Native Americans. Let's see if that pulls up anything. The connection between the Native Americans and the Turks, as in from Anatolia. Right? Let's see what they have to say real quick. No, not so much. It's not connected to any Native American language, as it was an obsolete proposal for a Eurasian language family that has no connection to the Americas. So you see what they're doing here, right? Like they're denying it openly. It's for some reason is this constant. I have some of these articles actually discussing it. I just can't remember the names, and I don't want to waste any more time on this video. There's this constant dismissal of modern day scholarship. It's like the whole of academia has been dumbed down, and like we've lost ground. We've lost understanding, even though we've gained realization at the same time, thanks to the internet, that there is in fact a pattern of what they call in the mystery cyclopean architecture, these like irregular, oblong, smooth, megalithic stones that are found throughout the world that are somehow, despite their incongruity, so evenly cut that you can't place a razor blade between them, and they're like, we're talking about like 50 to 100-ton stones on average. The recurrence of pyramidal architecture throughout every major continent, despite the fact that this has been openly recognized, it's as if academia really has literally been dumbed down. And this is a trend, in fact, that you see when you look into sites like Göbekli Tepe, where you see that or even the Giza Plateau, or any number of ancient sites where they actively prevent people from doing any sort of meaningful archaeology. Like they actively prevent people from. I've heard that at Göbekli Tepe. Apparently, they've closed up the site and they're planting trees over it. You know what I mean? Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. So, all right, that's all I got. Much love.